Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Captain's Table. I am your host, Captain B-Nard, and topic of discussion today is going to be the BHDL1, a complete review of, reaction to, and reflection on the entire season of the Draft League. The Draft League has come to an end at this point, just a few days ago, and so as you can see by the beautiful low-quality thumbnail, if you didn't know already from the battle video, we did make it all the way up to the semifinals, ended the season with a 7-4 record before, of course, being eliminated in the semifinals by the eventual winner, Raymond. But we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. Um, so I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I have done these Draft League recap podcasts in the past, just due to the fact that I introduced a new element to the Draft League content this season in the form of my weekly recaps and preview videos that I did. In seasons past of draft leagues, I kind of spent a lot more time talking about my matches week to week in the podcast review of the season at the end. So I'm not really going to do that so much this time. But you guys will see. I'm going to do things a little bit differently. We are still going to talk about the season, obviously. Um, but yeah, you'll see as we're going to go ahead and continue on here. The first thing I want to do, aside from stating what I've already stated, is I want to talk about the semifinal game here. For those of you who didn't watch, and even those of you who did, just to kind of give my full thoughts on it. And obviously, we didn't do a weekly recap or anything like that for that, since it was our last week in the league. As I mentioned, we did lose the game, unfortunately, 3-0. Our opponent, as I had already mentioned, was Raymond, a very strong competitive battler and seasoned draft league participant, as we have stated before. And the game itself was a good game. I'm not going to lie, obviously, I was a little disappointed about losing, but also I was a little disappointed in my own performance in this game. I definitely don't think it was my worst game of the season by a stretch, but at the same time, I also feel like I could have done things differently. I could have played better in this one. I was also, as I had stated during the game, caught off guard by some of the sets that he brought to battle. Yeah, that just kind of was what it was, but still a good match nonetheless. I'd say probably the key moments in the match, for me at least, were obviously the first turn where um, I go ahead and I lead the game with the Iron Moth as he led the game with the Dunsparce, and so I actually just pivot out, not really sure what this Dunsparce is going to do to me, switching directly in with my Arcanine, which then proceeds to get one-shotted by a what I can only assume choice specs max special attack boom burst off of the Dunsparce. Um, yeah, obviously that was a very awful way to start the game for me, and it was really hard for us to recover. We ended up not being able to, obviously. So that was a pretty key moment in the game. Another key moment in the game was a few turns later when we have our Gastrodon in against his Sandy Shocks, and I had a feeling he was going to be Terra Grass, but at the same time, I thought he was going to be choice item on the Sandy Shocks. So I decided to make a very reckless and risky play to leave the Gastrodon in on the Sandy Shocks, full well knowing that there's like a 99% chance it's Terra Grass. But at that time, I had thought it was choice item. And unfortunately, it turned out to be not choice item, as he terrestrialized to a grass type and one shots the Gastrodon with a Terra Blast Grass. So that was very unfortunate, obviously, for me. And then the third moment in the match that was kind of a similar, but similar situation where we had to lose a Pokemon without it doing anything was several turns after that. We have our Goodra in against his Chen Pao, and in this situation we have to switch Goodra out because it's really our only way to stop the Sandy Shock, so we need to keep it alive. And so this is also the last turn of the grassy terrain that he had set on the field with his Rillaboom, which means that if I want to go ahead and get my Hawlucha in to activate the grassy seed, it's going to be now or never. So I had a feeling he would probably just go straight for the ice move to take the Goodra out, but I really had no choice but to try and chance it and hope that he overpredicted, and in fact he did not. We switched the Hawlucha to an incoming ice spinner, and it just goes down in one shot, despite the defense boost from the grassy seed. It's not enough to survive one of those. In this game, we unfortunately ended up losing three of our six Pokemon that did not get to do anything in this game at all. So that was extremely unfortunate for us. Like I said, some of it was just being caught off guard by his Pokemon. Some of it was just bad playing on my part. But yeah, it just kind of was what it was. Like I said, not it was a good game, but I definitely feel like I could have played better for sure. But in any case, having said that, that was pretty much the semifinals, our last hurrah here in the league. Um, so yeah, having said that, we're going to go into more of our journey throughout the league as a whole right here. So, we're going to go over every rendition of the Philadelphia Pidgeys that we had throughout this draft league, starting with the team that we originally drafted here and the team that we would have in weeks 1 through 4 of this league. And as you can see on the screen there, that is going to consist of Iron Moth, Gudra, Orthworm, Gastrodon, Hawlucha as a Terra Captain, Pincurchin, Espathra, Wigglytuff, Arcanine as a Terra Captain, Barraskewda, and Brute Bonnet. So, looking at this team in retrospect, I was pretty happy and still kind of am pretty happy with the team that I was able to put together here. The first, I want to say, several picks were I was really happy with. So I was really happy to get the Iron Moth. Obviously, the Gudra being the staple of the Philadelphia Pidgeys on every rendition of the team in every season. Was there. I was happy to pick up the Orthworm as well because I was hoping that I could do something big with it this season. Um, Gastrodon, a very solid bulky water type, and then Hawlucha and Pincurchin kind of just completed the electric terrain core. So those 6 Pokemon, as you'll see in a couple of shots here, those 6 were pretty much just the staple standard of the team throughout the season, and I was very happy that I could pick all 6 of those up. So I kind of, when I designed this team initially, that was really the core of the team that I had planned on bringing most weeks, and in fact did bring most weeks to most battles. As I felt it was pretty balanced, pretty powerful, pretty solid little electric terrain strategy going there on the team, and pretty happy about that. Wanted to try using a strategy like that because in no draft league that I've been in to this point have I ever tried to use either a terrain or a weather strategy, so I really wanted to give that a shot and see if it could be good. Um, I was really drawn to the electric terrain strategy simply because, despite the fact that there's only one terrain setter in the game, or at least one legal terrain setter, don't really count Miraidon, but yeah. So despite that, I think it was a cool strategy just because you have not only a lot of Pokemon like Hawlucha that can get unburdened and take advantage of that, but you also have now in Scarlet and Violet the Paradox Pokemon, or specifically the future Paradox Pokemon, all of which have Quark Drive, which obviously I'll take advantage of that terrain as well. So I thought that was it was nice to have that versatility. So that's what really drew me to building this team around an electric terrain core. So again, I was really happy with that. Now the rest of the team I was relatively happy with. So picking up the Espathra was something that I just had a lot of points, and I figured it could be a potential heavy hitter. So I was glad to snag that. The Wigglytuff and the Arcanine, just kind of balancing out some weaknesses and resistances. Also Pokemon that I have drafted in previous leagues. And then the Barraskewda and the Brute Bonnet were just kind of thrown on there at the end, essentially, for a little bit more variation and versatility. And because I had quite a few points left over. So I don't know if I mentioned this before or not in my analysis of this league, but at the time that we were drafting these teams, I kind of sort of did math wrong, and I didn't realize just how many points that we had to draft Pokemon with versus how many, or I should say, how few Pokemon with high point values that there were available in this league just due to the Generation 9 Pokédex. So I ended up having like way more points left over at the end of the season than I kind of anticipated or wanted. And had I kind of like looked into the future a little more and done math a little better, I might have built this team a little bit differently. The one regret that I have about this team is that I wasn't able to get a single ghost type on this team. And that's something that I did regret at various points throughout the season, especially in the final week, obviously in the semifinals, because obviously Ghost is a great type. very good with its multiple immunities, and a lot of ghost type Pokemon have good stats and can either be tanky or offensive. So yeah, there were a lot of good options. Unfortunately, they kind of flew off the board pretty fast, and by the time I really had a chance to think about picking up a ghost type, really wasn't much of anything left on the draft board. So that just kind of was what it was. Like I said, I maybe could have prioritized getting a strong ghost type, and maybe next time I will do that. But yeah, that was really the one thing about this team that I wasn't happy about after drafting it. But other than that, I was pretty happy with what I put together. So, as I mentioned, this was my team in weeks 1 through 4. At the end of that 1 through 4 weeks, we ended up having I believe, 3-1 record at the end of that time. So, we ended up doing pretty good with this rendition of the team, the early draft, which is, of course, great. But now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the transactions that we made here. And that is going to lead us to the rendition of the team we had in weeks 5 through 7, where the changes we made here where we went ahead and dropped Barrascuda and picked up Slowking, which I was very happy with that pickup just because, again, I still had a lot of points left over. I kind of wanted like another tanky water type that I could use as more options in case Gastrodon wasn't a good bring in certain weeks. And so I thought grabbing Slowking, as Slowking had actually ping ponged around between a couple of coaches in the early goings of this league, and it was on the free agency when I managed to grab it, and I was very happy with that pickup. I'm a little disappointed, as you'll see in a couple of images here, that I didn't really get a chance to really use Slowking more this season, but yeah, I was happy to pick it up. So the other change that I made was I switched my Terra Captain from Arcanine to Orthworm and Pincurchin. And at the time, the reason I did this, as I had stated before, was that I really thought that um, having Arcanine as a Terra Captain ended up not being the best allocation of my resources, because Arcanine was not a Pokemon that was coming every week just based on the way that I had designed this team. I had hoped I could get to bring it more than I did, but I realized that I wasn't really bringing it as much as I wanted to. So I decided that it might be a good idea to switch the Terra Captains over to Orthworm and Pincurchin. Unfortunately, that did not end up working out for me, and actually quite ended up biting me in the ass, because it kind of led me to terastallizing Orthworm in several situations where it was not beneficial for me to do so, leading to me taking some losses actually in certain games because of that. And at the end of week 7, which is the end of the tenure of this version of the team, we had I believe, 4-3 record. So we actually only won 1 game, lost 2 games with this version of the team to leave us with a 4-3 record. So I was obviously not happy about that, which led to the final change that we made with the team, and that is going to be the rendition of the team that we had in weeks 8, 9, quarterfinals, and semifinals. And the only change we made here was basically reversing that Terra Captain change that we made earlier, where we took it away from Orthworm and Pincurchin and put it on Arcanine for the reasons that I just explained, because we ended up, or I should say, I ended up really misusing the Terra with those as my Terra captains, and that led to some defeats. So I figured putting it back to Arcanine would probably be best case scenario. And of course, that did help us out, because we proceeded to, with this rendition of the team, I think go 3-1. So we won 3 and then lost 1, bringing our final record, up to that 7-4 record at the end of the season. So yeah, not really too much else to say about that as far as the team composition. So really, overall, the team composition didn't change too much this season. Little tweaks here and there, as you would expect, I think, is customary for most coaches in most leagues. But yeah, overall, didn't end up making too many changes, because I was pretty happy with the original version of the team, and I would say it served me pretty well. So moving along, we're going to come to our overall Pokemon stats here for the Philadelphia Pidgeys in the BHDL1. So, here you're going to see every Pokemon that was on the Pidgeys roster at any point in time this season, and three numbers next to the names. So the first number is going to be the amount of games that that Pokemon came to. Now, this does not necessarily mean that we used that Pokemon in that game. It just means that we brought that Pokemon on our squad to that game. So, that's the first number. Second number is going to be the amount of kills that that Pokemon picked up throughout the entire season, playoffs included. All of these numbers are playoffs included, by the way, I should say. And then obviously the last number is going to be the number of times that that Pokemon got knocked out. So, you can see obviously at the top of the list here we have Hawlucha as our only Pokemon that came to all 11 games that we had this season. One of our only, I believe, two Pokemon that had, or I guess maybe three Pokemon technically, that had a positive KDR this season, which is kind of funny, as obviously our kill leaders on our team were over centralized around really two Pokemon, those being Hawlucha and Iron Moth. Um, following Hawlucha, of course, we had Orthworm, which came to 10 out of 11 games. So obviously, that was really, a big staple of the team as well. Then we had Iron Moth that came to 9 games. Also Gudra and Pincurchin, which came to 9 games each, and then Gastrodon that came to 8 games. So, again, as I mentioned earlier, those six Pokemon were really like the core of the Philadelphia Pidgeys in this season. Those six Pokemon came to just about every game, if not every game in some cases, with them, and that would be obviously the first grouping of what I would call three dividing lines, essentially three dividing lines that you would forge um, for the Pokemon that we had on our draft team this season, and those are the top six. So um, the next grouping of Pokemon here you'll see toward the middle slash bottom of the middle is we're going to have the Espathra, the Arcanine, and the Wigglytuff. So all three of those Pokemon obviously came to 3 games each. So they were just kind of like filler Pokemon. I was able to like get them in a few weeks here and there. If it was an advantageous matchup for them, I would end up bringing them to a game, but obviously they didn't make too many appearances each. Didn't make too much of an impact. I think, as you can see there, Espathra is the only other Pokemon with a positive KDR on the team aside from Hawlucha and Orthworm. So again, most of our work was centered around that, which kind of makes sense, obviously, with going back to the Hawlucha and the Iron Moth being like the cornerstones of the electric terrain strategy on the team. So them being the kill leaders definitely makes a lot of sense. So um, but yeah, so and then the final grouping of Pokemon would be Pokemon we barely, if at all, brought to the games, and those would be obviously the Slowking, having only made one appearance, and then the Brute Bonnet and the Barraskewda, which we dropped, having made 0 appearances each. So for the Slowking only making one appearance, again, I am a little disappointed about this. I really hoped and thought that I could use Slowking a little more. Unfortunately, the matchups just were not there, and maybe I could have built the teams a little different to accommodate Slowking, but I just felt like again, well, first of all, I should say, obviously, we didn't have Slowking the whole season. We only had it for about the latter, like 2/3 of the season. So for the first approximately third of our season, we didn't have Slowking. Um, so yeah, that would be part of that. But also, it ended up not being a great bring in a lot of the weeks after that. So that's kind of the reason for that. Similarly, Brute Bonnet and Barraskewda, as you could see, did not make a single appearance the entire season. Now, obviously, in Barraskewda's case, all the way at the bottom, that's because we only had it for the first 4 weeks. Of the league. As a side note, I will say it was nice to see Barraskewda after it was released from its contract with the Philadelphia Pidgeys, went on to get signed by the Leaf Agents and Scorpion, who actually was a fellow semifinalist here in the BHDL1, and he actually made great use of that Barraskewda after he picked it up. So I was pretty happy to see that, just because Barraskewda is a Pokemon I really do like, and I was disappointed that I couldn't really find a use for it on this team, but unfortunately, with the niche that Barraskewda has, it was just filled by Hawlucha basically every week, exactly every week, I should say. So I didn't really, early I kind of realized that I wasn't really going to have an opportunity to bring Barraskewda basically ever this season. So that's kind of the reason for that. And of course, last and least, unfortunately, much to Viridou, also known as Viridou's chagrin here, is going to be the Brute Bonnet. So, Brute Bonnet was on my team, obviously, for all 11 weeks that we were active in this league, and did not come to a single game. So, I have to say, um, I was disappointed in this. Trust me, I was. And I have to say that not every week, but probably about 50% of the weeks, I very, very, very heavily considered bringing Brute Bonnet to the game. And actually, in the semifinals game this past week, I was very close to actually bringing Brute Bonnet to the game. I actually thought it had a good matchup against the Sandy Shocks, and I was actually extremely close to bringing the Brute Bonnet to that game. Unfortunately, I ended up not making that pick just because I figured that stuff like the Gudra and even the Gastrodon, depending on what Terra the Sandy Shocks would be, would have a better matchup against the Sandy Shocks. So um, once again, of course, Brute Bonnet didn't come, and that was kind of the story of Brute Bonnet throughout this entire season for me. Is that there was no game that I had where I could see Brute Bonnet being a more viable bring than the rest of the Pokemon that I had. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Pink Urchin was basically a must just about every week so it could set the electric terrain up. So that was kind of the one downside to this team, as I would say, is the fact that Pink Urchin is a Pokemon that um, I don't. It doesn't have a ton of usefulness outside of setting the electric terrain. It's not a bad Pokemon, and it actually does hit harder than you would think on the physical side. But unfortunately, it just I think having to have that Pink Urchin to set the electric terrain pretty much every week was probably the main reason that Brute Bonnet didn't get to come to a game this season. And it just kind of is what it is. I mean, it's like I said, it's a little disappointing because I wanted to bring Brute Bonnet to at least one game, um, but it just didn't happen. So that's pretty much the reason why. So, having said all of that, we're going to go ahead and move into a couple of new things we have on the list here in the um, post-season podcast, and that is going to be some player awards here, or Pokemon player awards, whatever you want to call them. So, we're going to have two positives and two negatives here for the team as a whole. And so the first one is going to be the MVP, and the MVP is going to go to Hall Lucha this season. So um, some of you might think that it's actually really close and a really difficult decision between Hall Lucha and Iron Moth, because obviously those were basically the two Pokemon that carried this team throughout the entire season. Those were the two Pokemon that scored most of our kills. Those were the Pokemon that won most of our games for us. So, and in fact, it was sort of a difficult decision, but at the same time, not a difficult decision between Hawlucha and Iron Moth. Reason being is because obviously, if you look at our stats from the previous slide, Hawlucha came to every game, Iron Moth did not. Additionally, Hawlucha, I think, in more games than Iron Moth, came in super, super clutch for us. I'm not going to say Iron Moth didn't, because it very much came in clutch for us many games as well. However, I feel like overall, Hawlucha had a better performance this season than Iron Moth. I think um, it put in more work than Iron Moth. It held on for longer than Iron Moth. It had more epic moments in the season than Iron Moth overall, although, again, it is close. But for me, it was a clear decision that the MVP of the season is Hawlucha for the Philadelphia Pidgeys. Now, the other positive award we have is for the Pokemon that surpassed my expectations this season, and that one is going to have to go to Orthworm. And reason being is because Orthworm is a Pokemon that a lot of people sleep on, especially since Shed-Tail got banned, because that was pretty much the premier thing that Orthworm did, was it was able to get a Shed-Tail off as one of only, I think, two Pokemon that could learn that move. Um, and so, since Shed-Tail got banned quite some time ago, Orthworm has been a Pokemon that's really fallen out of favor, and a lot of people don't really give Orthworm the credit it deserves, in my opinion. But Orthworm is a premier physical wall, pure steel typing with a unique ability that gives it an immunity rather than a weakness to ground types, makes it. I believe the monotype Pokemon with the most resistances slash best weaknesses to resistances and immunities ratio in the game. Um, as I mentioned, its physical defense stat is off the charts. It's got a pretty decent move pool, actually. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. It's great for hazard stacking as well. And so, honestly, Earthworm put in more work this season than I expected it to. I was hoping Earthworm could put some work in this season when I drafted it, but I do have to say that it definitely put in more work than I thought. Surviving attacks when I needed it to, setting up hazards when I needed it to, even getting many kills when I needed it to as well. So the Earthworm was definitely that one that surpassed my expectations. Now, on the flip side, we have our two negative awards here, and the first one is going to be for underwhelming performance. And as much as it pains me to do this, I have to give that title to Arcanine. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to bring Arcanine too much this season, as we saw in the previous slide there. And part of that is my fault, but part of that is also just the team composition. So, kind of what it boiled down to is that I didn't want to have too many Pokemon coming to any given game that all had the same weaknesses. And with Pink Urchin and Iron Moth coming just about every week, obviously those are two Pokemon that are weak to ground. Iron Moth actually having a double weakness to ground. So obviously, Arcanine having its weakness to ground means that it was just kind of a Pokemon that I couldn't really bring if ever I was bringing both Pincurchin and Iron Moth to the battle. So that's kind of why Arcanine did that, or didn't come more. But even then, even in the games that I brought Arcanine, it kind of didn't do as well as that I hoped it would do. And I'm not going to lie, I think a big reason for Arcanine landing in this position is what happened in the semifinals last week. Is I was very surprised that a max HP invested Arcanine could not take one attack from a Dunsparce on the special side, regardless of it being, stab and specs and all that. So that was very disappointing, or that was probably one of the most disappointing moments of the whole season, to be completely honest with you guys, is switching that Arcanine in this first turn of the semifinals and it getting one-shotted by the Dunsparce. But even aside from that, in other games that I brought it to, it really only had one game that it had a pretty good showing, and that was actually week one of the season. But other than that, Arcanine really did not perform in a way that I was hoping it would. And again, I think part of that's my fault, just for team composition, not bringing it as much as I wanted to. But overall, like I said, I was disappointed with how Arcanine worked out for me this season. Um, but that is also going to feed us into the last title that we have to give out here, also on the negative side, and that is going to be the least valuable player LVP award. And unfortunately, it has to hands down go to Brute Bonnet. Because obviously, as we saw in the previous slide, Brute Bonnet was a part of the Philadelphia Pidgeys for the entire season and did not show up to a single game all season. Again, part of that's my fault, just because of team composition. But another reason for that, big reason for that actually, is that the Brute Bonnet typing is actually just abysmal. Like, being a grass dark type is just a pretty horrible typing, especially when you can see it coming, especially in Draft League, just because there's a lot of pivoting. There's a lot of U-turning, of course, which Brute Bonnet is X4 weak to, of course. So Brute Bonnet is just, it doesn't feel like it has a good matchup in draft, and I kind of know that now, but yeah, that's kind of the reason for that. It just maybe, I don't know, maybe I would feel differently if I had given it a chance, if I had tried to work it onto a team somehow and given it an opportunity to show what it can do. But it just, in every single week, like I said, probably about 50% of my games approximately were weeks that I had heavily considered bringing Brute Bonnet to, and I just didn't, because it has so many weaknesses. It just felt like it had such a bad matchup against so many Pokemon on opposing teams. And so for those reasons, Brute Bonnet did not come to a single game. For those reasons, it has to be the LVP of the Pidgeys here this season. So that is going to feed us into one more new thing that we have to talk about and show you guys real quick here. And that is going to be my personal top three and bottom three games of the season. So, um, I'm going to talk about a little bit about each game and why it lands on each list here. Um, Probably the one thing that all the top games will have in common will be just I was happy with my performance, I was happy with the game results, that kind of thing, and the bottom three will probably be the exact opposite of that. Not happy with my performance, not happy with the game results. But we're going to go over them. And again, these are in no particular order. I think they're just in order of in chronological order of how they happen. That's how they put them. I put them up here. So, the first one of my top three games is going to be my Week 5 game versus Scorpion, a game that we did end up winning. I believe, I just want to check my records here before I say, but I believe we won that game. Um, Yes, it was a 3-0 victory. Okay, so I was right. So that was a game that we had won 3-0 against Scorpion. So the reason this is one of my favorite games this season is because this was a very highly competitive game. It was a really fun game. I feel like I played really well. I feel like the matchup was very even on paper, and obviously getting the victory was really nice. So yeah, that's kind of why this game is in the top three. Games, just kind of all those stars kind of aligning, as I had mentioned prior. So that's this game. Another game that I would put in my top three is going to be my Week 8 game versus Stefan. So um, reason I would put this game in here, a couple of reasons actually. One, obviously, because we did win the game 4-0. It was a huge victory for us that came at an incredibly critical point in the season because we were kind of teetering on the edge of whether or not we would make playoffs or not. And we really needed a win in this game to kind of right the ship and get ourselves back on track after going on a mini losing streak. The game was also very good. It was a very competitive game. It was a strong showing for us. I feel like we played well. And for all those reasons, this is going to be one of my favorite games of the season as well. And that kind of feeds into the same logic will feed into the last one on this list, which is the quarterfinals game versus Icy Dude. So again, kind of the same reasons why I would put this as one of my top three games of the season, just because I feel like we played very well. Everything kind of just worked out. We got a big 5-0 victory, the biggest victory all season, to advance to the semifinals. Um, it was a highly competitive game, but at the same time, we really kind of, thanks to a little bit of luck, ran away with the game. And yeah, it was just kind of our team firing on all cylinders and doing exactly what it was supposed to do in best case scenario. That was the best example of that was this game. So yeah, those are going to be my top three games there. If you haven't watched any of those games, I would highly recommend going back to my channel and watching those games because they're all very good games, very solid, very competitive. Like I said, I played very well, I think, in these games and just really enjoyed them. But yeah, that's going to take us over to our bottom three games. And so, unfortunately, every coin has a flip side. So, this is going to be the flip side of this one. So, the first one of our bottom three games is going to be our week 2 game versus Emerald Miner. So, you guys will all probably know if you've been following me throughout the league at this point. Pretty much the biggest and number one reason that this game is going to be on my least favorite games list of the season is, of course, going to be the infamous freeze that the Articuno got on the Hawlucha that ended up costing us that match. So obviously, that is going to go down as the biggest hack, I believe, probably one, definitely tied for top two of the biggest hacks that happened to us all season. And actually, the other game that had the other biggest hack against us this season is going to be also a game on this list. um, but yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest reason that this game is on here. Obviously, we ended up losing the game. I believe it was I just want to check to be sure, but I believe it was a 3-0 loss. Yes, it was a 3-0 loss for us. So those are the reasons why this game is going to fall on that list. Just the hacks and the loss, obviously. But then moving along, our next game on this list is going to be our Week 7 game versus HIM. That was another game that we ended up losing 3-0. the big reasons why this game is on this list, one is because this is actually the other game that the other big hack against me this season occurred, and that was when we got critted by the, I believe, we got critted our his Lucario critted our Earthworm and knocked us out actually, with I believe a close combat. I want to say, I think it was a close combat. Um, yeah, so that was obviously the other really big hack against us this season that screwed us in that game. So yeah, that's that, plus the fact that I feel like of all the games this season that I had, this week 7 game versus HIM, I feel like this was my poorest played game of the entire season. I'm not sure where my head was at here or what my issue was, but I was very unprepared for this game, and I very disappointed with my performance in this game. I think this was hands down, I want to say my worst performance all season was this game, this week 7 game. So those are the big reasons why this game is going to fall on this list. And finally, the last game, of course, on the list is going to be the semifinals match just last week versus Ray. Biggest reason, obviously, this is going to be on the list is because this is where we get eliminated from the tournament. So, obviously, that is we're not happy about that. That was disappointing for us to be eliminated. Um, but also, I think we did not play particularly well in this game either. That's another kind of side reason that this is going to be on our bottom 3 games list. But yeah, obviously, the being eliminated is the big one, because obviously we wanted to try and go all the way, made it very far, but obviously could not quite get the job done. So, but yeah, that pretty much caps it for this. So, having said all of that, we have a couple of closing statements to make. So, first closing statement I want to make is a huge congratulations to Ray/Raymond from the Discord server. Go ahead and join the Discord server. It's the best place to go for Pokemon Scholar, Violet, Wi-Fi battles right now, in my humble opinion, and all that good stuff. I'm not going to do the whole thing right now, but in all seriousness, I do want to say a big congratulations to Raymond for becoming the first ever Pokemon Scholar, winning the entire BHDL1 Draft League tournament. And I made this little graphic to kind of commemorate that for him. So um, obviously, nice job in doing so. And yeah, it was a pretty phenomenal season. And when all the dust settled and all the smoke cleared, this was your BHDL1 winner, your first ever Pokemon Scholar, Raymond. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. So, um, but having said that, I will make a few closing statements now. So, yeah, this video has gone on longer than I wanted it to, but that's okay. So, closing statements here. I will say, overall, very fun season of Draft League here in the BHDL 1. I had a great time. Overall, I thought that the season was very successful. There were a lot of great matches. I think we had a lot of great matches. We had a lot of great moments. Obviously, everything did not go our way, but it never does for anybody for that matter. But I was very happy to become a semifinalist here to earn my way into the semifinals with the team that I put together. Still incredibly proud of the performance of the team and myself this season. And even though we did not go all the way and win the whole thing, very happy with the league as a whole. I will say the coaches and the player base in this league are good people. They are nice people, and they made for a fun and friendly environment here in this draft league. Probably more so than any draft league I've ever been in to date. This is going to be my 6th draft league, coming to a close here total. And so, yeah, I am thankful for all of that and happy about all of that, that we were able to have a fun and successful season here in the BHDL 1. And I can definitely say with a high degree of confidence that you will see the Philadelphia Pidgeys return to Season 2 of the BHDL whenever that may happen. Probably be several weeks, if not a couple of months, till that happens, I would imagine, just because of all of what's going on in Pokemon. Obviously, that Season 1 just came to a close, so there's going to be a little bit of a break, I'm sure. And obviously, as you guys will probably know at this point, DLC is upon us. So in about a week's time, I want to say, from posting this video, we are going to be hit with the first Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC pack, which is obviously going to drastically change the game. We're going to have access to a whole bunch more Pokemon that we did not prior. There's going to be a whole bunch of new Pokemon and new forms coming out. So there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in the world of Pokemon here. So what does that mean for the future of Captain B-Nard and the channel here? Well, as you guys can probably guess, I do have the DLC. I did pre-order it months back, and so as fate would have it, I'm actually going to be starting vacation. I want to say like the day after the DLC drops, which is kind of funny. Um, so you might actually have a little bit of a break here of content on the channel, unfortunately, just because I'm not really going to have the time to immediately start cranking out teams. I don't think. Um, what I am going to do between now and then, though, is I am going to have some doubles games. I think I did actually make a couple of new Pokemon, but I kind of want to just kind of clear all that out, use them, have some fun with that, have some more battles for free battles for you guys before the DLC comes out, and then after the DLC comes out, you may see a captain's table talking about the DLC. You're definitely going to see brand new singles teams come back with those DLC Pokemon for sure. And yeah, it's going to be a good time. Like I said, might be a little bit of a pause since my vacation is occurring at the same time, which will set me back a little bit. But yeah, a lot to look forward to in the coming weeks and months here for the Captain Beanard YouTube channel. So, but yeah, once again, just want to say I had a blast here in the BHDL1, and now that that's over, looking forward to getting back to doing more free games here, and looking forward to the future here, future content on the channel. So, but that's it. Thanks for watching again, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and/or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos in the future. So, that's it, and we'll see you next time.